All right, everybody, don't be shy. No one will bite. Come on, sit a little bit closer.
Morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Kara Trani. I'm Senior Vice President at JLL, and we're excited to be co-hosting today's event with Rock Health and Collective Health. For those of you who aren't familiar with JLL, we're a global services real estate firm, and we work with our clients to help provide solutions for their real estate needs. We're really excited about today's topic because we've seen a growing trend with our clients to a commitment in wellness in the workplace, and we've actually started to see that evolve into a more holistic approach to employee wellness, both in and out of the work environment. So we have a very esteemed panel today of individuals who are going to share their insight and knowledge. And we have Jude Komuves, Chief People Officer. I want to get this right, so I'm going to read. Apologize for cheating. Jude brings more than 15 years of high-growth technology startup and leadership experience in all things people. Her portfolio includes talent acquisition, human resources, and corporate facilities. Jude's teams ensure that Collective Health has the talent, resources, and programs in place to grow and succeed. And prior to joining Collective Health, Jude was operations lead at an early-stage social consumer startup, VP of People at Square, and head of people and recruiting programs at Google. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Jude. You can do the introductions and kick off the discussion.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us, especially on an early-ish morning. I know the morning is such a precious time for everyone, so very, very grateful to you carving out this day and this hour to spend together. It's really my honor and my privilege to host this incredible group that I have here to my left. I'll let everyone kind of do a quick introduction of who they are, where they've been, what they're currently working on, and then we'll kick it off with some really exciting discussion around wellness in the workplace and diversity and all that good stuff. So without further ado, go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited for a few reasons. First, just to be here with you, and second, because looking at the back, I'd never heard of an everything croissant before. And it kind of changed my life this morning, so thank you for that.
It also changed mine, mostly because at Collective Health we obsess about, not surprisingly, wellness. And so one of the things we think about a lot about is our food program. And so we don't actually allow a lot of the types of treats that we've offered this morning into the building. So I was like a kid on Christmas morning when I saw that everything croissant. If you haven't had a chance to eat it, highly recommend.
I haven't had one, but I did Instagram it. So, hi everyone, I'm Joe Burton. I'm the founder and CEO of Whil. We have a digital well-being platform where we help mostly large employers to help their employees manage stress, become more resilient, improve their sleep. We have programs for mindfulness, emotional intelligence. We integrate into all the corporate wellness platforms, Virgin Pulse, Limeade, Castlight, and more we're working with payers and providers like Aetna and Kaiser Permanente. Nice to be here with you.
Hi, my name's Julie Black. I'm the Chief Consumer Officer at Evidation Health. Evidation is a company that is geared towards enabling and empowering everyone to participate in better health outcomes. We do that through two primary solutions. We have a direct-to-consumer product called Achievement, which is the team that I lead. It's a rewards platform for healthy activities. So users can sign up, earn points for their steps, meditation, food logging, sleep, basically everything that can be tracked. Those points are redeemable for cash or donation to charity of their choice. And then we also have a deep and rich program for doing studies and analysis to understand which programs are driving outcomes for which individuals and how much those outcomes impact both the overall health of those individuals who use them and the overall spend in the health.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Lowe. I am in charge of health and safety for employees at Airbnb. I come from more of an environmental health and safety background, but so I hope I give a different perspective on some of the issues that we talk about today. But definitely my role intersects and is deeply tied in with wellness programs at Airbnb.
Hi, I'm Alejandro Foung. I'm the CEO, co-founder at Lantern. And like Joe, we offer a program that's mobile-based with behavior change coaches, so that support you with synchronous or asynchronous text and telephonic care, in addition to programs that are offered over the phone that you can access whenever you want, that focus on kind of a trends diagnostic set of techniques, programs that help address things like anxiety, depression, eating issues, stress, etc., that we tailor to every individual and population that it is we work with, spanning kind of areas like kind of commercial, so like employee health, to anything that could be like discharge from inpatient behavioral care, so like a psychiatric stay or something like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. And in the spirit of the topic of the panel today, we'll start with kind of our first question, which those that know me know that I really like to ask 3 questions in one question. So there are 3 parts of this question, which is 1, what does wellness mean to you and your company? 2, why are you particularly passionate about it? What is it? Why is it important? And then 3, what's sort of your favorite metric currently that sort of measures wellness? No pressure, Joe. You don't have to start. Anyone can start. We can just jump right in.
I'll start. Okay, so I think for me, I'll start with the why. And I'm just joking with, I think I saw Jay in the lobby. I was like, man, I've been doing this for 5 years and it feels like I'm just starting. And that's kind of, I think you do it because you really want to make the change that it is that you seek. Not because, for me at least, is that my family has a history of like mental health issues. And then prior to starting Lantern, I worked in e-commerce and real estate, technology. The company I was at before was Trulia. And so when I was going to have my first child 5 years ago, and I thought about like, what is the narrative that I want to tell her about what I do and what I want her to do. And it felt like something that I just needed to do. Is that I studied psychology. So it's just kind of a personal rationale and reason for starting Lantern. So I just believe in providing better care in the mental health arena. So that's kind of my personal motivation. In terms of how we define wellness at Lantern, I would say that's a pretty tough question. And I would say that for us, it's also a personal answer, because individuals who are struggling, they don't necessarily identify with a label of anxiety or depression or any particular thing. They might instead say, I feel, I have a lot of trouble waking up in the morning because I just have a general sense of hopelessness, right? I don't feel like I'm able to contribute at work because I get incredibly nervous contributing in meetings, and I just don't feel right. I'm unable to focus. So for us, we need to meet individuals where they are, and that entails everything from like coaching philosophy, our interaction style, to the content that it is we provide. So wellness is really dependent on every individual. On the flip side, which is that's not a really good story if you're like going into Airbnb and you're like, what's the value you provide? And you're like, well, it depends on every individual, which is a good story. But at the end of the day, businesses are businesses, and they want to be prudent with how they're deploying their resources and capital. So I would say so that's more like the qualitative answer. On the quantitative side and metrics to your question, there's really 3 core things that we have historically measured at Lantern. The first is what any psychologist would measure in office, which would be a standard measurement tool. So PHQ-9 to assess kind of depressive symptom, GAD-7 anxiety, PSS, which would be like quality of life score. So we use these standard measures to know, are we hitting the benchmarks that any, psychotherapist would measure and see? That's one. The second, kind of hits to like ROI. Why would a company invest in Lantern outside of, our employees want LaCroix, so let's give them LaCroix. Like, our employees need mental health support, so let's give them mental health support. That's great, but a lot of times decisions are not made that way. It's like, what's the return on the investment? And so for us, the 2 additional metrics that it is that we look at have been historically medical utilization. So the idea that your physical well-being is connected to your mental, state, emotional well-being. And so where the expenses are higher typically is the medical expense. So to what degree do your medical utilization, how I'm accessing care, how is that driven by medical expense? So typically payers would look at that as claims. So that's one measure. And Lantern actually just very recently we submitted a paper for an 18-month study that we just completed, which shows for a match control in a primary care environment, we see Lantern users having a 45% reduction in outpatient encounters when that individual is a high utilizer of care. So that's like a measurable hang your hat on result. The second would be kind of, I think, more to this audience, which is like an employee setting. We have actually been able to measure with one particular partner employee retention. So we compare it's a large employer that has 20,000 employees, and over an 18-month period of time or 14-month period of time, we're able to see that the individuals over that period of time who use Lantern versus who don't use Lantern, they have a 11% higher retention rate. And if you actually do the math in terms of like how much did Lantern cost versus like what was that retention rate, it's like a 15x ROI. So those are, I wouldn't in my mind say like, well, that's wellness, is employee retention. But the problem is that it's not really good enough to just say people are feeling better. You have to have these other metrics which kind of roll in and support the idea of why are we buying, LaCroix? Why are we buying Lantern? And these are important reasons.
All right, so I'm going to come back to the original, or at least from my perspective, the question on wellness. And when I think about wellness and what it means to, at least to my career at Airbnb, and what employees are looking for, and where I kind of came from and why wellness is important to me, I guess I'll start with that latter question. And for me, I really got into working in health and wellness because I liked to do exciting things in life. So my major in college was actually adventure recreation, and it was real. It's no longer a real major, but that's really what my major was in college. And I got into it because I wanted to do things like climbing mountains and wilderness survival and whitewater kayaking and whitewater canoeing, and just doing really exciting and dangerous things. And what I found by trying to do exciting and dangerous things is that you want to survive when you do them so that you can share the experience and do more exciting things. And there was something after doing that for a few years that kind of clicked in me, that really started thinking about, well, how are you able to do those things? And one, you have to be in pretty good health to do some of those experiences, and you have to be safe, and you have to be prepared for things to go wrong. And as I got out of college and I started looking for something to do with a career, I ended up becoming in training for emergency preparedness based on some of my skills. So I did some training in things like CPR, and then I got more into occupational compliance, things like hazardous materials. And what really kind of sparked that original spirit of adventure and wanting to do exciting things and led me to where I am today is trying to help people achieve very interesting things that sometimes are dangerous. So my career eventually took me into things like working at PG&E and helping people do things with electricity and helping do things with chemicals and doing those things safely. And then eventually I found myself at Airbnb, where it's really a low hazard company. There aren't a lot of super dangerous things that are going on at Airbnb. It's mostly we have a few different categories of employees, but I mean it's very diverse as far as what people do. But we do have a lot of designers and engineers that work on a computer a lot in offices, and we have a lot of people that do customer service in customer service type of environment, and then we have a lot of people that are out in the field doing things like engaging with local and state governments or countries around the world. So even though it's not quite as exciting and dangerous, people are still trying to achieve at Airbnb a community where everybody gets out of their houses and gets out and travels and grow. And so for me, that spirit of adventure and growing and getting out there is very tied to my current vision of wellness. And that's how I really try to look at how Airbnb addresses this topic, because when you want to work at Airbnb, most people, they are into similar things. They may not be into, you know, hardcore adventure things, but there's a spirit of travel, and then there's a spirit of community. And if you don't know a lot about Airbnb, you know, you might think that it's just a place where you can go and rent a room when you're traveling. But the real spirit of it is the connection between the host and the guest. And when you're an employee, that is also what we try to foster, is this community where everybody can belong and everybody can do things that are kind of exciting. And so when we think about wellness, we really I try to tie it into that aspect of the company, what the company's mission is. And it's creating not only a world where people get out there and travel and experience the world, but it's a world where people can belong. And you know, getting back into health and wellness and what it means. I mean, I think it's such a broad topic. It's hard to think about it for me as mental health or emotional health. Those are big components. Physical health is a big component for me. Physical health, as it ties, you know, you have to be at a certain level of health to be able to think about things in your office, and you have to operate on a certain level where you can contribute great things that are new ideas to allow people to be connected together or allow people to go out and travel. So I guess those are some of the reasons why I got into this field of health and wellness. Well, how do we measure it? I measure it in a lot of different ways for my job. I measure it on very base levels, like how many people get injured. Yeah, there are people that get injured in different ways. But how often people get injured, how often people report that they're not feeling well. And they do that through a variety of programs. I think an effective ergonomics program is you know, a lot of people might think of ergonomics as just you know, using your computer and sitting there. But when you're talking to somebody about the problems that you're experiencing while you're working on the computer, you often tell that person about a whole lot of other problems that you're experiencing that can lead to clues or ways to help people with other issues that are directly tied to their health and wellness. And then, you know, how do I intersect that otherwise into maybe some of the areas that some of these other panelists are really detailed, focused in on, working with groups working with our HR or our talent group, you know, closely to think about ways and what do employees need in order to achieve their goals and operate at the highest level that they're at. And I think that's enough rambling for me on this question. So I'm going to pass it on.
Like Alejandro and Matt, I have sort of a similar story for why I'm interested in this space. It's different because everybody's story is personal. So for me, I spent the majority of my career prior to my role here in online advertising. Right? And I was in the business of trying to help marketers sell ads much more. Google, I worked at a startup, and then I went to found the ads. And then I had a moment where I was crossing the street at 7th and Brannan. It's a really nasty intersection. So be super careful. I was in the crosswalk, did everything right, and a gentleman plowed me over in a car. And so it was, and I'm fine, right? Like totally fine. No worries. It's great. I broke my arm in 3 places. It was not a big deal. I was super lucky. And my colleagues at Pinterest were amazing. They helped me get to the hospital. They came to check on me, made sure I got connected with my family. And it was kind of in that moment that I had this feeling of like, gosh, when I can't use my right arm, and by the way, I'm like a righty, I can't hold my son, who was 10 months old at the time. I can't feed him. I can't show up at work and be effective. I can't type on my computer. And by the way, I was a software engineer by training, so that's a really big deal. You know, I was lucky to be working at a company that had such a strong community to make sure that I ended up in a really great place and had the care that I needed to be taken care of. And it was really kind of through that whole experience that I realized how fundamental wellness, health, and all of those things are to our ability to be productive and engaged. And so that's a scary story, but I think it's important to understand like why I landed here. And so I kind of had that same moment where I went home to my son and I was like, am I going to tell this guy like I did online advertising? No, I want to have some more impact. And so I got involved in trying to help build a community of people where it's about the personal, right? So my story of what it took for me to go from that accident and be back to a productive employee at work is really different than what it might take one of my colleagues who's struggling with depression or anxiety or mental health to go to be productive at work. I needed physical therapy. I needed, x-rays. I needed a cast. I needed stuff like that. I needed ergonomics in my desk. But other people need services like Lantern to be much more effective. It's about building a product and a solution that really does, I loved what Alejandro said, meet people where they are, right? Help advance them along their health journey. And that's what we're focused on. So that's a little bit about me and the personal and why I'm doing what I'm doing. In terms of metrics and how we think about it, I mentioned this at the beginning, half of our company is about doing evidence-based generation, right? So understanding what solutions are working for whom and how much. We run clinical trials with a lot of these different digital services and solutions and measure things like, do medication adherence apps truly make people more adherent to the medication, right? And we look at the metrics around that. We publish publications in peer-reviewed journals. So the things that we look at for metrics are both the qualitatives. If we go out and we talk to an individual user of our service, are they feeling better? Did they accomplish their goals? Are they moving in a positive direction? And the quantitative, if we're helping connect someone to an app to address a mental health condition or a diabetes condition or whatever it is, right, weight loss, whatever it is that person needs connection to, is that solution actually helping them accomplish their goals? So that's kind of how we think about it a little bit, and a bit more about me.
You guys are super thorough. And the next time I have a chance to go first, I'm totally taking it.
There's no pressure, Joe.
So I'm going to start with the why and with a few questions for you. So within the audience, how many people are suffering from back pain? Just a show of hands. How many people are suffering from insomnia? Stress. Annoying coworkers. Yeah, that one's easy, right? Don't point. It's not nice to point. I think this is the human condition, right? The pace of modern living, the ongoing pace of change, disruption, this is what we're all up against. It's what our employees are up against, and this is what got me into the business. In my early 40s, I was the global COO of a 50,000 person division of a public company. And wore as a badge of honor, working 14-hour days, traveling 70% of the time, while my health deteriorated. Right? So I had 2 herniated discs that turned into insomnia, that turned into asthma. So my body was kind of falling apart. Right at the same time, I lost 2 sisters, one to drugs, a year later, my twin to suicide, and family issues around alcoholism, drug abuse, and so forth started taking a whole new meaning in my life as an adult. And so for the past 8 years or so, I've been involved with helping create consumer apps like Headspace, investing in amazing solutions like Lantern, and 3.5 years ago, I started Whil, really to focus on how do we help professionals deal with what we throw at them every single day, right? Constant disruption and the pace of technology. So the human brain's not really equipped to deal with what we're dealing with right now. It takes thousands of years to evolve the human brain to be equipped for how an environment changes. Technology has changed rapidly in the past 20 years. So that's why I'm in the business. That's why I think it's important. And I agree with the panel with respect to how you measure. I think measurements are really important, and who you play with matters. So we look at things like the WHO5 with respect to well-being, perceived stress scale, Pittsburgh Sleep Index, et cetera. Constantly asking our users, hey, what's going on with you? Try this. How's it going now? Right? So that assess, prescribe a solution, and then measure an outcome we think is really important. I think when it comes to wellness, for us, we focus a lot on sort of well-being and performance, and we leave it to the user to decide what performance means to them. But if they don't have good and healthy well-being across different aspects of their life, they're not going to be equipped to perform, whether it be as an employee or a parent or an athlete or you name it.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to cheat slightly and also answer this question. And this is the only question I will answer. But I think from my own personal wellness journey, I think as I sort of started to approach the big birthday of 40 and had spent really sort of the last 15, 20 years focused mostly on my career and really shifted to wanting to start a family, I realized that, and sorry to get all, more of it on people, but I realized I probably had 30 great years of like massive health ahead of me. And when you really start to think about life in like, okay, well, 30 is not really that big of a number. And I can literally remember the last 30 years of my life. And then you really start to think about, okay, well, that's really scary because the 30 of anything isn't a lot. So then I started to really think about life through sort of like, okay, every month matters. It's not just around like, oh, this was a good year or a bad year. Like I really started to become much more conscious of like, is this a good month? Is this a bad month? Am I making decisions in a way that really support, my values, my goals, et cetera? Very similarly to other folks on the panel who have children, I have a wonderful, darling 18-month-old son now. And, he just really sort of brings into very stark relief, like just all the things that really matter in life. And, I'd spent my entire career helping, Julie and I both worked at Google, really amazing companies become, even bigger and more successful. And in the world of people, one of the things that I'm responsible for is administering and managing benefits for the group of employees that I am really here to recruit and retain and nurture and develop. And it was the part of my job that I hated because there was no tooling, there was no technology, there was crappy data. It was the second most expensive line item on my budget, second to payroll, and I had literally no ability to understand why my renewal was going up 35% and where all those dollars were going. And it was like the one time a year I was guaranteed to look like a total buffoon in front of the CEO and the CFO. And we really talked about this healthcare investment and like, really, what did we get for it? And so when I met Ali and Rajay, and they started to tell me about what they wanted to build here at Collective Health, I literally laughed in their face and I was like, you guys are insane. This is like an incredibly hard problem. I don't want to work on it. And then I realized what an amazing opportunity for me to solve a problem that affects all of my peers, and that is so important to just us as a society and a nation, in terms of just the out of control spend on healthcare and how much that outpaces the rate at which wages are rising. And so employees are spending more and more every year on getting worse and worse care. And Collective Health is really here to build the technology and the platform and the service to help improve that. So that's sort of my own personal mission. I really think about wellness through a very holistic lens. So we think about it everything from the building that we inhabit and the desks that we provide our employees to. When we took over this space, we very deliberately created a staircase that we forced everybody to go up and down to. Please, if there are any Collective Health employees in the audience, close your ears. We deliberately set the elevators to go really slow, so that people didn't want to use the elevator because they were like slightly annoyed at how long it took for it to come and how long it takes it to get to the top. So these really sort of small nudges are things that I obsess about. I mentioned the snacks. We literally have like very, very few products in the office that have any real meaningful amounts of sugar, and that's very deliberate. It's not a very popular decision. I'm sure Julie will remember when at Google we took away all the snacks. It was probably, I think Sergey and Larry almost got stoned that day. I also was very unpopular the day that we really sort of reduced down the kinds of things that we offered. We're very thoughtful about who we partner with for our food programs in terms of our caterers. All the way up to working with folks like JLL, who I don't know if Maddie's in the audience, but we really obsess about the spaces that we inhabit in terms of the quality of light and air and food and all of those things, because they really matter in terms of how people feel day to day. In terms of key metrics, there's a couple that I really think about. So one of them is, as Joe mentioned, annoying coworkers. It's actually one of the things we obsess about at Collective Health is making sure that we have a really clearly defined culture that is more than just this person isn't a culture fit. We've actually articulated what it means to be a culture fit through a set of very clear values. And we interview for that, and we reward and recognize people for that. And so one of the metrics I actually track is sort of our internal net promoter score around like how likely are you to recommend Collective Health as a great place to work, because that obviously is a good signal of like, do your coworkers annoy the crap out of you or not. Then another metric that is personally near and dear to my heart is the rate at which working parents return after going on parental leave. And I'm very proud to say that we have a 100% return rate. And that's something that I think about a lot, because I think that really is a good indicator and a signal of sort of the health and wellness of your community, of your team, that people are really excited and feel supported and able to come back to work in a really productive way, similar to sort of the community Julie mentioned when she had her very scary accident in Pinterest. That community matters so, so much. So those are some of the things I think about and why wellness matters to me and sort of how we think about it, collective health. So let's move on to our next question. We've talked a little bit about sort of thinking about wellness through the lens of diversity and meeting people kind of where they are. I'd love to hear from each of you what that really means and how you bring it to life in terms of that meeting people where they are on their wellness journey. So are you going to go first this time?
I'll go first this time.
Perfect.
Yes. By the way, if you guys come back tomorrow, there'll be a line of people picketing elevator neutrality. So just keep an eye out for that. Throttling the elevators.
It's a thing.
It's
highly effective.
I think in terms of meeting people where they are, first with respect to our products, we want to ask people questions and then make recommendations and play along with exactly what they need. And I think if we do a good job in doing that, users tell us, they rate our programs, whether they're helping them or not. So they 93% are rated as, yes, that's what I needed, it helped me in the moment. We're also listening constantly to our clients around what they need. And over the past year, with everything that's going on in the world and the political environment and so forth, we've had a lot more requests around programs for acceptance, inclusion, diversity, and with a very pointed, I think with an edge to it around people aren't treating each other very well. People are taking sides, right? So whether that's with politics or whether that's having a millennial versus boomers culture, it's something that more and more companies are paying attention to because at the end of the day, that's all friction, that's all stress within our corporate environment. I think paying attention to the individuals, also the teams. What do you need? What's going well? And what could be better?
Yeah, for us, I think for our product, I'll talk about product and I'll talk about company. So for us, in terms of product, it's about listening to the data that you get, right? And not just quantitative, but qualitative also. So we have a deep user experience, user research team that goes out and actually talks to our users to understand, what is working and what's not, and hears from them both, deep qualitative feedback about how to evolve the product and make sure that we're constantly making it better to address individual needs. And we talk to folks with wide arrays of conditions and wide arrays of needs, wellness, and all across the spectrum. Quantitatively, we live in a digital age, and there's lots of information that we get if you just kind of listen to the signals, right? And so our company is really deep into doing machine learning, large-scale data processing, to really get down to the individual and understand them, and truly build a product and solution that's tailored well. From a company perspective, one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is flexibility, right? And so with flexibility comes the ability to individualize what it is, right? So we have an open vacation policy. People just kind of take time when they need it. We have, most of our wellness programs are actually done more in the form of budgets that folks can spend, right, in terms of what they need and what they need to be important to them, right? So we kind of think about building flexibility into the culture, the company culture, trust into the company culture, right? That's something that's core to our product and to our company, is building a company of trust, where employees and of our end product and solution, we're building a dynamic of trust with them to trust that they'll do the right thing.
Okay, so how do we drill down to each individual person? That's a tough one, and I think especially with the variety of programs that we try to offer, I would say one of the struggles that we have is trying to roll out and get to the individual with wellness programs in the same way at a lot of our smaller regional offices as we do at our main larger offices, like our office in San Francisco. I feel that even though it's our largest office with a lot of people, in some respects in San Francisco, we are able to, at least the way I look at health and wellness, we are able to really get down to on the individual level with a pretty broad array of different services and products that are available to them. But like I mentioned, sometimes the struggle, in my view, as I try to look at the company as a whole, is how can we provide the same or similar level of services to people where we have an office with only 20 or 30 people in the country, and that's the only one in that country. But some of I could speak a lot about in San Francisco in particular. It's when you have a lot of employees, you have to have a variety of programs because everybody does have different needs and everybody is at a different level for what they need. So um, making programs available for physical fitness all the way through programs or services available for people with their own emotional needs. It's a difficult challenge. Yeah, I'm just going to pass it over to Joe.
Slash Alejandro.
Sorry,
Yeah, it's okay. We look very similar.
yeah, very.
So at Lantern we have this kind of saying where we really think that mental health is for all, and I'll just give you two examples of how we think about that. One is, through education. So a lot of the Lantern content is written. So we make sure that all of the content that we write is like 8th grade reading level. So thinking about education as a measure of diversity and inclusion. So that's being able to read all the content that it is that we provide, tone, voice, those sorts of things. We also think about we're deployed in a really wide variety of settings and populations. And in this case, I'll say, kind of where you are in life, but then also like your socioeconomic status. So, for example, Lantern is used at Facebook for employees for their benefits. And it's like, you've ever been to Facebook campus, you're like, this is like the Disneyland of employee benefits. And then on the flip side, we also have deployed in safety net clinics like in Detroit, Michigan. And so then we look at, for someone who's on Medicaid, or primarily for the safety net clinic for people who are primarily on Medicaid, what is Lantern's effect from a symptom reduction, engagement standpoint, penetration, NPS, all these other things? What is it at Facebook? What is it at the safety net clinic in Michigan? And so we, want to make sure that we work for a diverse set of individuals from a socioeconomic, education, racial, all of these various kind of measures. So that's how we think about it.
As you guys think about wellness and your various roles, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about it? It's not just goat yoga, which we are doing here at Collective Health, by the way. It's a thing. And then, what are the aspects of it? So what are the biggest misconceptions and what are the aspects of it that tend to be the most overlooked?
Can I jump in? So I think one of the things is that it's either exclusively physical or exclusively mental or exclusively yoga. Right? I think that one of the things that we've observed is that wellness is actually about everything. It's about all of the different components of your life. So one of the ones that I've been spending personally some time focusing on is financial. Right? We don't talk a lot about financial wellness when we think about it in the context of physical health, for sure. Right? But really honestly, if I can't afford to go to the grocery store and buy organic kale, I'm going to be at a disadvantage as compared to my colleagues and friends who can when it comes to putting healthy food on the plate. So I think that's one of the most common misconceptions that I hear a lot is that wellness is about one component or one aspect of people's lives. I think it often gets bundled together with health insurance, right? And how you think about benefits and healthcare spending. But it's so much more than that. It's like the holistic approach that makes us all able to be our best selves on a daily basis. Yeah.
Which part of it is most overlooked?
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, you did.
I'm gonna go again. I
Joe.
think because I have the microphone. I would say, honestly, I mean, this is probably biased for me to say, but I just think that mental health is like for sure an ignored area of wellness, because I think that we're just, as a culture and as a people, we're just conditioned to do the easy stuff and talk about the easy stuff like wellness, like yoga and like snacks and all these other things. Is very approachable. Even like physical well-being, if like you're limping into the office, it's like, what's wrong with your leg? Wow, but you should really, do you have a good chiro? Like all of these things are easy to talk about. And for emotional mental health, like we're all supposed to be fine, but we're all like not fine. So I just think that, I think the misconception is just like, it's just the easy stuff. And actually wellness is the hard stuff. And it happens to be, from a stigma perspective, mental health is just ignored. And it's definitely over the past, I would say, like 5 years since we started the company. Like I remember like the first time I was like pitching around like a mental health startup in 2012, and it was very hard to get meetings. Like people just had like a visceral reaction to not want to talk about like mental health. And I think we've come a long way even in 5 years, but for sure, I think misconception is it's just, maybe that it's just physical. And then two, it's just the stuff that you can see and the stuff that you talk about.
So I think the one of the biggest misconceptions is we're in very early stages of my company focuses on the enterprise. We're in very early stages of what wellness means, right? And it's often, I think, misconstrued with employee engagement, right? And so there are lots of programs out there that say, hey, fill out your health risk assessment, get points and rewards. Connect your wearable, get points and rewards. Go through your biometric screening, get points and rewards. But what's being missed is what are you doing with the data, right? So now that you have all of that, and you have all these flags popping up, stress, anxiety, back pain, insomnia, diabetes, and so forth. What are you doing with the data so that people can then take action? And then are you remeasuring? In the absence of that, all you're doing is running points and rewards programs, right? And people like to get cash. If you're giving out cash as part of those points and reward program, awesome. There's a lot of research that suggests those trying to have extrinsic rewards backfire over the course of time. I think we have to focus more on the intrinsic rewards of how do we tie into culture? What does performance mean to the individual? Are we helping the individual to develop? And I think that's really important.
I don't think this is a misconception, but when I think about this question and what's missed maybe sometimes in wellness, and I can at least speak in my experience coming in and trying to set things up at my company, at some previous companies, but one low-hanging fruit thing that affects everybody's wellness and might be a little bit more on the facilities end for a lot of our discussion today, but I've just found that indoor air quality is an aspect that affects everybody's wellness that is overlooked, especially in businesses where they're not directly tied to things like clean rooms or clean environments where you have to, or healthcare where you have to very specially measure and collect the data and do things about the air. Just from measuring the air inside of different buildings all over the world and having to see some of the problems and how to fix them and how those problems can affect people. Not just on the level where you're sick or you're causing your employees to be sick, but maybe just at the level where people are just not feeling 100% or feeling a little bit tired. So I think that maybe not a misconception, but I think it's definitely something that people don't think about very often that affects everyone's wellness especially in the workplace. But I would also agree with what a few of the other panelists have said about issues that are hard to communicate are often the areas where we need to focus the most on. So people don't tend to like to share problems that they're having emotionally or with their mental health, and so any kinds of programs or activities that can either encourage sharing, especially I find with people that have a lot of responsibility or leaders in a company, sharing those types of problems. Just as another way that I don't think we see enough of that would have a big impact.
I love the way you tied in the air quality to that outdoor adventure degree. Bam.
Was that your mic drop, Joe? So speaking of taking action, what's one thing that you would recommend folks in the audience to, things that you've seen work really well, just an easy place to start, something that will really help move the wellness needle forward in whatever way you've defined wellness for either your company or your customers or whatever it might be?
Start on this one too. I would say for people who are trying to maybe think about ways to make wellness work for your company on the company side, like I might be, I would really try hard to look for ways to tie in what you're trying to offer with what your company does. And in my case, at my company I work for now at Airbnb, I do try to tie things in as much to travel and to what our product is and to the community that our company is trying to foster. And I think that when you can tie your programs into what brings people to want to come work at your company, I think you're going to have some more success with it.
I'll take this from like the founder early stage company perspective, because we have like struggled with this, especially like, 5 years ago. But I would say, understand who it is that you're selling your product to. And, it's important. Is this an employer? Is it a provider? Is it a payer? And then you need to make sure everything that it is that you're building, you're saying to your customers, the data that you're collecting really fits with that story, because the decision making that an employer versus a provider versus a payer, and again, I'm just focusing on healthcare, is really different. And so what people want to make how you talk about, is it emotional well-being? Is it mental health? Is it behavioral health? All of those things mean something different to whom it is that you're talking to. So ensuring that you have a really keen understanding for who is your buyer, who is your user, all of those things, I think is critical.
I'll kind of go down a slightly different path. I would say it's really important to focus on the values that you're trying to bestow, right? And I liked what you said about thinking really, really hard about values and how those drive the decision making. And so both, from a corporate perspective, thinking about what is core to the company, and then how do you want to embody those in the programs that you offer, right? Because that will speak towards what you go after, how you spend budget, that kind of stuff. From a product perspective, again, there's core principles that guide how we work and what we focus on, that are all kind of driven by what are our core values and what is the product experience that we're trying to deliver to our users. So I think getting started starts from figuring out, what is the fabric of who are you, and what are you trying to bestow on your customers, your employees or your users or whoever you're trying.
And I would add, when you think about your company, just ask the question, are we really committed to what we're doing? The companies that we work with that are not successful in rolling things out take a check the box mentality, right? Oh, okay, we've got exercise covered, and we've got on-site yoga covered, and we've got snacks covered, and now we're going to cover mental well-being. Awesome. But it really takes a commitment to bring it into the culture so that you can walk the talk, right? So the CEO, the management team, HR, are committed to taking care of employees or helping them take better care of themselves. And as you get into that, that shows up in how you speak to employees, right? Is it a dinner bell with like, hey, all the stuff we have is waiting for you? Or is it, we're talking about mental well-being, here's how it's important, why it ties into our culture, how it maps to your intentions and the expectations for performance. And without that kind of intentionality, programs don't work, right? With that kind of intentionality, you can change an entire culture within a company.
Speaking of sort of getting executive sponsorship and buy-in, I'd love to hear if anyone has any great and sage advice for, how to convince that leadership team or that, or perhaps that ultimate buyer or customer that wellness is in fact really important and something that they should pay attention to and invest in.
I think if you're having to convince, you're probably talking to the wrong potential clients, right? It has to start with the C-level team on this is important, we're committed to it, and how are we going to make it part of the company experience? One of our clients is Tower Health, the hospital network. They rolled our product out and made it really embedded it within the culture. Keep in mind, healthcare professionals suffer from every form of disease at a rate 40% higher than the rest of society. The doctors and nurses are generally very sick people because of compassion fatigue and constantly being exposed to stress. Well, when you embrace it and say, taking care of our culture starts with taking care of our people, the next thing you know, it turns from digital programs into live programs, into bringing communities together, into creating success stories and videos about how this is changing people's lives. And and that starts with a C-level team, it really brings the rest of the organization in a way that you can't by telling people.
No, I was just trying to give you an opportunity. I mean, from my perspective, it's similar. I think it has to kind of be embedded in the fabric of the company. And I've been really personally very lucky that everywhere that I've worked, it's been something that the executive leadership has cared very, very deeply about, building a culture and that prioritizes wellness and employee well-being. And so I think from my perspective, it hasn't really been a hard sell. Back to even removing those snacks from Google, and I was a fan of it. But yeah, so I think it's about making it really clear why it's important from a metrics perspective. Some of the things that we've already.
Definitely agree with the, you need to have your C-level people and the people that are ultimately going to set the tone for the culture of your company on board with initiatives like this. But I will say sometimes there is the reality that you have some gatekeepers that you need to sell on some things when you want to put some programs or things into place. And some of my advice would be to, when possible, learn from other people's mistakes or learn from their successes. Sometimes it's sometimes with health on some of my side, on the safety side, it's learning from other people's mistakes. But definitely you can try to learn from people's successes. That would be an even better way. And then definitely if you have to go this path, learn from your own mistakes. So when you see issues and then you have to tackle them in your own workplace, make sure that you fully document what happened and what the lessons learned, and make sure that that message gets all the way up to the top so that you can change the culture from hopefully other people's mistakes, but maybe sometimes your own mistakes too. So yeah, I guess that would be my tips for now. I'll pass it to Alejandro.
I think it's a challenge, right? If you're trying to convince someone who doesn't believe in the wellness to believe in it, it's a pretty tough sell to convince someone to believe. I think ultimately, maybe this is a question of salesmanship, right? Which is trying to differentiate between what's a critical need versus something that's a nice to have. And you can talk about your services in many different ways. So the degree that you're able to understand the true needs of any organization, individual, executive team, gatekeeper, I think you can, position your service, your product in a way that as best possible meets the needs of that organization. Even if your product is the same, I think that's really critical.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your incredible insight and perspectives. We have about 10 minutes left, I think, for questions from the audience. So we at Collective Health have a tradition of having this really fun, puffy microphone that we throw around during our all hands to the lucky volunteers who have questions. But this is really now your time to ask anything that's top of mind or that you'd like to hear and learn more about. So Erica will come around with the mic.
Thank you for not throwing a broken arm. What is I guess maybe for Jude and maybe for Matt, what's your perspective on on-site physician offices that is employee sponsored, both from an employee experience, ROI perspective, and is it something that both of you have considered?
So sure, I can start. So Collective Health, we're currently about 350 employees. So we're still, quite small. We're fully insured, and so that's sort of a little bit of a background of kind of who and where we are. On-site clinic is certainly something that we've considered and have talked about. It's a little early for us at this stage, which is why we've actually chosen to have a really deep partnership with One Medical, which is really, they're a pioneer and a leader in sort of building the closest proxy to on-site clinic, which is just near site. So most of our employees live in the Bay Area. They live relatively close to a One Medical location, and so we actually pay for them and their dependents. Part of our benefits offering is that we pay for their One Medical membership as a way to kind of softly step into what that potential on-site clinic might look like for us.
I would say very similarly. We have definitely considered it. We consider it as we expand and we look at bigger offices. We don't currently have one. We have a little bit over 2,000 employees in San Francisco, in a few different buildings right now. But I also we have a partnership with One Medical. I use One Medical. I think that's is how we get close to that type of service right now.
Is this a mic? Okay, I think it is. Sweet. Well, thanks for the time. Honestly, it's been an awesome panel. I work for a health technology firm called Cypher Health, and we're about 150 employees, so floating right around the Dunbar number. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but my question to you all is, how would you suggest promoting wellness and building a culture around wellness within a flat organization that doesn't quite have the C-level sponsorship, if you will? I mean, and we work for a health tech firm, so I think we're all kind of sold on the concept of wellness, but I think it's more around doing activities, promoting various different policies, or yeah, mostly activities and policies around wellness.
I'm happy to answer this unless anyone else has any thoughts. But so obviously, Collective Health is in the business of wanting to improve how people access, experience, and pay for their healthcare. And so the collective wellness and health of our employees has been sort of paramount from day one, because that's exactly what we want our members and our customers to experience. And how that really manifested here was that we had someone on the team very early on who was incredibly passionate about wellness and brought that passion into everything that they did. Started a bunch of, but fitness programs in the early days, and has then really branched out into thinking about bringing financial wellness offerings into the workspace. She runs our annual employee survey, where we actually really measure sort of the psychological and emotional wellness of the team. And so it really sort of stemmed from one person channeling their deep passion, belief, and recruiting a bunch of intrepid volunteers from across the company. She built a great community around it. Every week we have something called Collective Fit that is hosted by a various member of the team that has a particular talent or skill around a particular wellness activity. So really sort of crowdsourcing and making it just a collective part of what we do. So I think that's a really great way of starting small. She happens to have the title of Health and Happiness Manager at Collective Health. She's also a business partner. She does like 600 different things. I often tell her that I will report to her one day because she is just a force of nature. And I think finding that person in your company and your culture who sort of has a real interest and passion for it, and as sort of a cultural catalyst, is often a really powerful place to start from very early on. And if you want to learn any more about what we do, I've embarrassed her enough, but Maddie Wilson is in the back. You can talk to her after. You may never poach her, though.
To that, I would add a lot of companies, particularly as they're scaling, don't spend enough time thinking about the emotional culture of the company, like what goes unsaid. And so we now have a lot of team programs where teams can come together. So whether it's your employee champions around the world, we do things like Express Scripts or GE, where they can actually create the community. Say, hey guys, we're going to go through an emotional intelligence program together, or a mindfulness training program together, or a self-awareness program together. And these are sort of bite-sized programs that bring people together, learn by doing, and then immediately go into conversation. What does that mean to you? What does that mean for our team? What does that mean for our culture? And those critical juncture points is the things that go unsaid and the lack of human connection that cause things to go off the tracks.
Thank you. Hello? There we go. Hi, so actually I appreciate the panel that you all put together. Just something which I've I'm a practicing physician, so I actually have to see this a lot, is the issues around over cell phone usage, or the fact that people are on Instagram and Facebook listening to their AirPods all day long. you mentioned about the whole issue that it took 1,000 years for us to develop the social interactions that we have, and now in the past 10 years, we have a brand new medium which we, entertain ourselves. Given the sort of plentiful knowledge here, is there any? The data is still sparse, but there's a lot of directional data that's pointing to anxiety, depression, FOMO, whatever that is, that's all becoming a bigger part of our culture at these, especially a lot of these tech firms where we employ a lot of younger folks. What about just bringing in some basic literature or information, or maybe some basic evidence to try to get people to curtail their usage, given some of the perils there are? I mean, we're doing this with food. We say you shouldn't eat sugar, and we're demanding that we have great food at these tech companies. What about just at least starting that discussion? Because it's being lost, and people are drowning a lot quicker than I think we realize. And that's just something I just wanted to bring up to the panel and see what your thoughts are.
I think it's a Center for Addiction Control came out with an interesting study last year. It listed technology number 1 as the biggest global concern for addiction. Not opioids, it's not heroin, technology. And there's a lot of science behind repetitive behavior. We train ourselves either to have positive and healthy lives or distracted and unhealthy lives. And devices are causing us to be absolute black belt ninjas at distraction. We don't want to have any time available. The moment we have a free second on our device, checking old news, checking the same feeds we check constantly. And then the brain gets so good at that distraction, we take it into our relationships, into our meetings, into our projects, where we can't focus. So Microsoft had a study last year. The average human being now has an attention span of 8 to 12 seconds. Same as a goldfish. So that's the same as a goldfish for you in the back. Checking your phones. And so this addiction, right? And we're training ourselves to be anxious, depressed, poor sleepers, because we ruminate and we think about these things constantly to the point of becoming expert. The brain gets very good at doing it, right? And unless we learn techniques to reverse that trend, what we're seeing every generation is getting worse. Right now, millennials report the highest level of stress, anxiety, depression, insomnia across the board. The iGen kids in middle school are already starting to surpass them. Right? This is an absolute crisis.
I have a really quick hack that I'll share, which is I've actually started to lock my cell phone into my trunk when I'm driving, because I've realized that the era of self-driving cars will not arrive fast enough. Because when I drive across the bridge every day, and I really would like to get home to my son every day, and when I look up and notice that everyone around me is on their phones. So shared it with a couple folks this morning who thought it was interesting. I'll share it with you. Lock your phone in your trunk. Your Bluetooth will still pick it up if there's some crisis, but I just realized that I was unable to not touch it, so I've just had to discipline myself to not touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fascinating topic. I personally would love to study it, and I think that's one of the types of things and types of research that we would love to do kind of as a company. So I think it's really, really interesting, and I may come find you afterwards. Personally, I went out and I bought one of the old school Nokia phones, right? And I carry that around on the weekends. It's awesome. You can't text. You can't do anything. All you can do is talk, voice call. And so if there's an emergency, people can call me, right? I don't need to be interrupted. I carry an old school camera to take photos of my kids. I don't use on my cell phone anymore. And so I personally agree. I think it's a huge crisis. I think it's really important to work on, and I think it's perfectly up our alley of something. Love to talk to you.
I also imagine a few years from now, if we're having a panel on wellness, this will be one of the core topics. I think it's very much an emerging area that each of us is thinking about, and we'll soon start to put sort of structure and programs around, and data.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Hi, everyone, thank you for your time today. What I'm interested in is understanding the sort of the catch-22 that I think we're all in. We're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about exercise, we're talking about time away, creating spaces where people can work in different ways, unplug. We're talking about connecting with C-suite in terms of integrating these things into our daily lives, and stress and all of those things, but we're all working 12 hours a day. So I'm interested in your thoughts about how to change the narrative or how to start the conversation about how do you integrate some of these programs, some of these opportunities, some of these ways of thinking into a workplace when people are already demanded 12-hour days and there's no time or space. So it becomes a catch-22, and I'm interested in your thoughts.
I think in those 12-hour days, there's a baseline around, do people have the skills necessary to succeed in the modern workplace, right? And when you look at our fallback techniques, they've been proven to be harmful, right? So one of our go-to techniques is multitasking, right? Got 5 different projects going on at any time. I can switch those. Research shows we lose 40% productivity when we multitask. There's actually no such thing as multitasking. All we do is change tasks. They're not progressing simultaneously. They're waiting for us and stressing us out. And when you go into an organization, and an organization has that constant disruption, right? Hey, can you focus on this for a minute? Can you focus on this for a minute? And you're trained not to say no, right? You're drawn into not only your own multitasking, but other people's multitasking. You look at that 12-hour day, how much of that is actually productive, like meaningful, moving things forward, versus having a culture of complete distraction and inefficiency, right? And I think this is when we talk to companies around the world about what is your culture, right? And I think the vast majority of companies invite individual employees into constant distraction and multitasking as a way of living. And it's incredibly harmful with respect to people's mental and emotional and physical well-being. So starting with the baseline, do you have the skills necessary to succeed? Starts with mindfulness, emotional intelligence, being able to say no, having opportunities to finish projects. It's a single task as a way of working. And is that easy? No. We've trained ourselves for decades to buy into 12-hour days and constant disruption and distraction. I think we do have to change that. Otherwise, in the next, it's expected in the next 10 to 15 years, all the statistics are going to keep going the wrong direction. So right now, 25% of people, employees, report being extremely stressed, meaning they can't cope, right? So within the next 10 to 15 years, that's expected to be 50%. Okay? So imagine half the people you know can't cope. Half the people I already know can't cope, right? But that's where we're going, right? So if we don't train people with the right skills to manage through the norm is chaos and disruption. That is the new technology norm.
I can share just one practical thing. This is a really hard question that I don't think there's a good or easy answer to. I certainly don't want to suggest that collective health has solved this problem, but it is a problem that we think about. And we actually, one of the things that we're trying to get better at as an executive team and a company is being much more disciplined and focused in the number of goals that we commit ourselves to every quarter. We use the OKR process like Google did, that was very famously championed and developed by Andy Grove, the founder of Intel. And so we're really trying to use that as the forcing function for creating focus and clarity around, you know, we're in this early stage, there's a million things we want to do, but these are the 5 things that are actually really important and critical. And trying to also then teach people to get much better at saying no to all the stuff that was sort of come in and distract them. Additionally, we've been very disciplined in making sure that we don't build sort of a FaceTime culture where people feel like they have to be in the office 24/7 to be considered high performers and high producers, and really giving people flexibility in terms of arrival times and departure times and when and how they do their work. So those are some of the practical ways in which we're trying to address or at least move the needle a little bit on this.
One other practical thing that I heard early on in my career is that management is all about understanding the key levers for each individual that reports to you and what is really important to them. And so when I sit down with all the folks that report to me, I try and ask them, like, what are the lines in your day that are really critical to you that we just can't do, right? Is it that you have to be home for kids with your family? I know that for me that's right? I want to be there every morning and I want to be there every night. Is it that you love to go for a bike ride 3 times a week in the morning and you need an hour first thing to be able to, what are those lines? And then how do we work together as me as your manager and to structure your day and your responsibilities such that all of those things so I think it's, again, getting down to the individual and figuring out how to tailor the work around that and understanding what makes them super effective. One of the things, I went to Stanford Business School, and one of the things that they said there was like, we talk a lot about work-life balance, right? How do we find balance between our work and our life? But the word that really resonated with me when I was a student, and I don't remember, I wish I knew who to attribute it to, was integration, right? So how do we integrate work and life together to create something that is a great experience? And that goes back to being super personal and super tailored, building that culture from the management down to think holistically about flexibility and what it means so that they can take
That's exactly right. And another sort of quick hack is we actually measure our managers on their effectiveness at having exactly this kind of conversation. So you build it into, you just expect your managers to do this, and it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think we're totally out of time, unfortunately, but I'm certainly going to be around for a few minutes, as I think some of the panelists might as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and big thank you to Rock Health and JLL for hosting this morning. Happy Tuesday.